I think we should get started. Welcome everyone to our monthly ChIPs Talent Connector webinar. I'm Bridget Johnson, ChIPs Director of Partnerships and Business Development. ChIPs' mission is to advance and connect women in IP law, and we do a terrific job connecting women through our events, our Global Summit, our Next Gen Summit, and our chapter events. We've developed these Talent Connector webinars to help you advance. We want to help you become the best version of yourself when a new opportunity pops up. That could be a job opportunity, or it could be a promotion from within your own organization. Today, we are absolutely thrilled to welcome Cara Hale Alter, the founder of Speech Skills. Cara and her team help clients with their personal presence. Today, she's going to focus on skills to ace your virtual interview. Just as a quick housekeeping, we'd like to invite you to put any questions you have in the chat, and ChIPs communications manager, Olivia, will be monitoring that chat as the questions come in. Now, I'd like to turn this right over to Cara. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Bridget. Yes, for me and my company, we focus on a skill set that sometimes seems intangible. Sometimes it's called leadership presence or gravitas or je ne sais quoi, but we very specifically call it visible credibility. And that's your ability to project confidence and competence so that other people just immediately recognize your value. Or if you're young in your career, then your potential. But today we're going to focus on the virtual interview, and I promise to offer some nutrient-rich information on how to come across at your best using this virtual medium. If you've made it to that virtual interview, it's a fair bet that they've already reviewed your resume and that you have enough credentials to be worthy of their time. So on paper, you have something that interests them. Now they want to see you, the human being, and the virtual interview is the most cost-effective way of filtering out those who seem to be a good fit and those who seem not to be a good fit. So they want to get a sense of you, as I said, the human being. If all they really wanted to know is more information about you, well, they would just offer you a form and have you fill it out. They could gain a lot of information that way. So it's your personal presence that really makes a difference. So what do they hope to gain in a virtual interview? Well, they want your personal style. Do you instill confidence in your abilities? How easy is it to create a rapport with you? Do you have good speaking skills, but also good listening skills? Do you have the ability to think on your feet and offer enough information without rambling? And do you seem self-aware? So those are the sorts of things that are really in the back of their mind when they're coming to this virtual interview. So it's really less about what you have to say and more about how you say it. So in short, they're assessing your nonverbal communication skills. Now, nonverbal, to define this specifically, nonverbal communication means any message that might be coming our way other than the meaning of the words themselves. So anything except the script of what you have to say. And I'm not suggesting that the script doesn't matter. Of course it does. But in the communication world, one of the things we say is that the script of what you say is the last most important element. And that's because before someone actually hears what you have to say, they have to create this filter through which to listen to you. They have to decide where to put what you have to say. And do they put it in the box that says, yes, act on this right away. I trust this. This looks great. Or do they put it in the box that says, I'm not quite sure about that. I'm gonna have to think that through. So it's how you say what you say that determines where they put the information. So this particular step in the interview process is more about how you answer questions, not so much the exact words that you're using. So I'm going to assume in this session that you already have some experience interviewing just because of where you are currently in the world. So I'm not going to offer tips that are really obvious that you could find in just any book on how to interview. I'm going to focus on this personal presence and the nuances of personal presence. However, there are two tips that are so vital, yet obvious, that I really must mention them. And one is that, by all means, be on time. This is a deal breaker for me when I'm in the interviewer position. Be on time. Unless your reason for not being on time is the top story on the news, there just is no excuse that is good enough. Because not being on time gives the impression you don't know how to organize your time well, or you cannot foresee possible challenges that might come your way. Again, this is the nonverbal component of the interview that we're addressing. So be on time. The second obvious tip that I know you know, but it's worth saying, is make sure you dress appropriately for the interview. Now, there's a temptation in a virtual interview to dress only the top half of your body. And I'm going to suggest you go all the way. Be as fully dressed as possible. It would be so unfortunate if you got an unusual question like, show me a possession in your environment that you think represents you well. And you have to get up to go get it, and you've got on flannel pajamas. So make sure you dress from head to toe. And the general rule of thumb for dress is dress for the job you want, like you already have the job, but also one of the best days on that job. So those two tips, I know you know, but they're just worth repeating. So, what am I going to cover in this conversation? First, we'll talk about the use of the virtual medium, what I call looking your best on webcam. Then I'll take a deeper dive into this concept of visible credibility. How do you invest in your personal presence so that your capabilities are on full display? And then finally, I'll talk about the balance between being authoritative and being approachable. And I honestly believe people can be both at the same time. So we'll talk about how, if you need to bolster up one end of that spectrum or the other, what behaviors might you prioritize to get more of one side or the other? I am happy to take your questions, and Olivia will be monitoring the chat to have the questions come up in the chat. So by all means, enter them in the chat. But I also want to point out that I have a lot of material to offer to you, and so I'm going to try to keep this as nutrient rich as possible. As I'm moving into this concept of looking your best on webcam, usually I offer a poll here, but I'm just going to cut to the chase on whether or not you are aware of the difference between cognitive trust and affective trust. And almost always when I launch this poll, what we get is about 95% of the time people say they are not aware of the difference or not familiar with that vocabulary. But it's really important to what we're addressing today. Cognitive trust is your intellectual trust of someone, your belief that they are an expert in some way, that they have some experience on their side. It is what you would know about someone based on their job title or their resume or their past experience and education. But affective trust is your relationship trust. And that's based on whether or not you believe the person you're interacting with is a stand-up human being, that they care about their impact on you, that they care about your perspective. So it's your relationship trust. That cognitive trust is just table stakes for doing business. Of course, you do need to have some experience and some education on your side. But it really is the affective trust that builds the relationship, that has the most influence. And this is the arena that we're focusing on today. So you can subtly chip away at this affective trust just by not using the medium well. So, for example, if I had come on with my framing like this, so that there's just all this extra space here. Or if I were interacting with you individually and I kept making eye contact with you this way instead of this way, which looks more like I'm making eye contact. These subtle behaviors would send the message that I don't see the world from your perspective, or I don't care about my impact on you. So the reason we should care very much about how we come across, it's not for our own ego. It's because when people get the impression that you are self-aware, that you know how you come across to others, They like you better. They trust you more. You have more influence with them. So this isn't just an ego trip in terms of making sure you come across at your best. It's relationship building. And when it comes to using this virtual medium, one of the ground rules here is that you want to get rid of any kind of cue or signal that the medium itself is artificial or second best or makeshift in some way. You want to look like you're just sitting across the table from someone. So you want to make the medium as invisible as possible. I use an acronym that is relatively unflattering, but it is memorable, and that is FLAB. And FLAB stands for framing, lighting, angle, background. And these are the four elements you want to check as soon as you turn on that virtual window. So, framing, you want to frame yourself from head to heart. If you put two fingers above your head, this should be the absolute top of your screen. And you want to give enough body language context that they can get a good sense of you. That's the whole purpose of using the virtual medium, camera on, is that we really want to get a sense of someone. So frame yourself from head to heart. And the biggest mistake we tend to see here is just what I would call missed opportunity. And that's I'm the same distance from the camera. It's just I'm not framed well. So want to frame yourself from head to heart. And I also want to point out, think about all of the virtual interviews you have seen on broadcast TV with remote experts. Those experts are told by the camera operator to frame themselves exactly like this. And these are companies that spend billions of dollars trying to capture audience attention. And so what they know is this is just the right level of context. So frame yourself from head to heart. And then one tip here, make sure to get your hands engaged because even if they can't see your hands, you getting your hands engaged tends to come across as more natural, more comfortable, but our skills don't live in a vacuum. And so when your hands are engaged, you are also much more likely to have more facial animation, more vocal variety, more overall energy. So do not fear getting your hands engaged. That's framing. Lighting. You want to face the brightest source of light in the room. Oftentimes that's a window. I'm in front of a window at the moment, except it's a very dim day outside. So I have supplemented that with lume cubes. That's what I have on each side of my screen. And depending on the weather or the time of day, I can turn them up or turn them down. But they also provide cross lighting, which means I don't have shadows on my face. The biggest mistake we tend to see here is too much backlighting. When you have more light behind you than in front of you, and that's when you look like you're in witness protection. So you definitely want to avoid that. But the sneaky one is top-down lighting. When you have a lot of light overhead coming down, you get shadows in your eye sockets and in your cheek sockets, and that looks a little skeleton-like. So you want broadband lighting coming from the front, and by all means, invest in lamps and or lume cubes or ring lights so that you can get cast yourself in the best light, literally. That's lighting. Angle. Even though this is third in my acronym, it is absolutely the most important. And that is you want your camera to be at eye level so that you are literally level headed, that you're not looking up or looking down in order to interact with that camera, that the camera is at eye level. But if you're talking to an interviewer or interviewers, you also want to move them as close to that camera as possible. So I highly recommend that you do not have them in speaker view, but you have people in gallery view so that you can adjust their thumbnails to be about 3 inches by 3 inches and move that as close to the camera as possible. So right now I've got Olivia in front of me. And what I want to point out is that right this second, I'm looking directly at the camera. But right now, I am looking directly into Olivia's eyes. And probably the difference between the two is so small that you can't tell the difference between me looking at the camera and looking at Olivia. But I have Bridget lower than Olivia, and now I'm looking at Bridget's eyes. Can you see the difference between this image here and this image here? So you want to get your interviewer as close to the camera as possible so that you have this more direct feeling of truly being across the table from someone. The final element of my acronym is B for background. So many personal choices here that are absolutely appropriate, kind of like your choice of dress, in that many, many things can work. You can use a virtual background or a blurred background or a natural background. But just as a heads up, I've been launching polls in my larger online seminars and asking people what they prefer to see. And about 75% of the time, it comes back natural. And so, if you have the ability to have a natural background, that is preferred. But the most important part here is you want to make sure that there's no distraction behind you or mixed messaging. If you have a big mess behind you, by all means, either blur it or virtual, because it's really not that important. But if you have the choice, a natural background would be helpful. Yes, go ahead, Olivia.
Someone in the chat asked, so if you have a camera that is attached to your desktop, separate, not using the one that's built into your computer, what's the best way to get that at eye level?
Yeah, I would say you would just have to work on the logistics of that. And I do use the built-in camera, even though I have one that comes over and is right in the middle of my screen. It allows it to come in the middle of my screen. But I found that meant that I would often look like this, looking at the camera. And so I am going to say this is just a technical issue, and you might need a different camera in order to make this really come across as very interactive. The more you can make the medium invisible, the more natural and authentic and you'll come across, and also the easier it is to create a relationship on the other side. All right, so I've covered now the FLAB guidelines. One element here regarding using your speaking voice is that having a really nice microphone can be very helpful. And I'm not opposed to a headset microphone. I know that we'll be able to see it, but hearing is so important that if that's the best way for you to truly be heard, it's not that big of a distraction. But it's how we use our voice that makes the biggest difference. Oftentimes, what people will do is speak at what they think is a natural, optimal volume intuitively between themselves and the screen. And that's only about 12 or 18 inches away. So, what we get is kind of a soft voice that sounds a little bit like this. So, I encourage you, again, back to that concept of just being across the table from someone. Speak to optimal volume about 5 feet away. That's what I'm doing right now. And that happens to be through the window in front of me. But still, I'm projecting my voice in order to come across with a full voice at just about 5 feet away. The same voice I would be using if you were sitting across the conference room table from me. Okay, so I've now covered the FLAB guidelines, framing, lighting, angle, background, and I'd like to move for a moment into the concept of visible credibility. Regarding this, we're going to do a very quick test for you before I dig into the material. And that's that I want you to get a quick view of yourself on camera if possible. So if you have your cell phone close by, I encourage you to pick it up and put it onto video mode. And one of the things we know about the interview process is that you are going to get the question, however it's framed, tell me about yourself. That's gonna happen. So we need to be ready for that kind of question. Can you do a very quick description of who you are and your essence within about a 45 seconds or 1 minute window? And just a quick heads up, a chronological order of communication is really not your best bet. I would start with what's most important. And if you can align that with more like your values or your driving force or mantra, that's even better. The interviewer is trying to get a sense of who you are, not where you've been. And besides the fact, they've already looked at your resume. So they already know a lot of chronological information about you. So if I were starting with this question, I might say something along the line of, well, I think the driving force for me is mutual benefit. I have such a strong belief in that quality, and I apply it to almost every aspect of my life. For example, and then could go into some details about this. So right now, I'm going to give you a chance to spend 45 seconds introducing yourself to me, answering the question, tell me about yourself, and I want you to create a selfie video. So I want you to hold your camera. Everybody except for Olivia and Bridget you're not on camera, so nobody's going to see this, but you can go back and watch it yourself. So I want you to hold it up like this, like you're really truly talking to me, and spend 45 seconds answering that question. I've got my stopwatch here in front of me and I am ready to go. So you are on go. Okay, that is great. Good. Well, you probably learned a couple things just now. And for one, if that was easy for you to do, congratulations. It means you've already given some thought to this question. Great. I do think this is an important one to give forethought to. But you also might have experienced a sense of talking all by yourself for 45 seconds. It feels like a long time. Great. So you can say a lot in 45 seconds. When you're answering questions, one of the rules, and this is a nonverbal cue, is can you give enough information without rambling? And I would try to keep your answers every time you answer a question to 2 or 3 paragraphs and then open up the opportunity for someone else to ask you another question or to dig deeper into that particular quality. But it also does depend on what the question is. If you get some sort of situational question, like tell a story about a time when, yes, you can take a little bit longer to draw that out. But get used to offering answers in this window of, say, 30 to 60 seconds, because that's enough time to tell something interesting, but open the door for another question. And then just a quick side note, I once interviewed an attorney, and when I first started listening to her, I thought, wow, she's a go-getter. I love this woman. And I was just so engaged, and she was dynamic, but she just never stopped talking. And so what happened is I just felt like, oh, okay, I just learned that about you, that there's no room for me here in this conversation. So, yes, of course, you want to display your ability to talk about yourself, but also just make sure there's room for the interview as well. Part of what they're looking for are your listening skills as well as your speaking skills. All right, great. So now you have that little video, and I want you to put it aside for a moment. Don't look at it just yet. And I'll cover some information about this quality of visible credibility. The 3 pillars that hold up your appearance of credibility and confidence are strong posture, strong voice, and strong eye contact. And I know all of you have heard that advice before. I don't expect that to be brand new information. But almost everybody severely underestimates just how powerful these behaviors are. And also, almost everybody overestimates their ability to do these things well. So, and that's because when we're thinking about them, we can do them well. But it's a rare individual who has these behaviors truly in their subroutines, in their muscle memory, so that they do not have to take up brain space thinking about these things. They just do them well. And that's what we want. We ultimately want to be unconsciously competent with each one of these behaviors. But let me be explicit in each category. Strong posture means that if you were standing up, your weight would be balanced equally over both feet. But whether you're standing or seated, your spine and your shoulders form a T. And this area right here has literal core strength. You have a literal strong spine. There's not a lot of flexibility or wishy-washiness going on in my core. Notice what happens to my appearance of leadership presence as soon as I allow a lot more flexibility in my spine. So this has literal core strength. And then your head moves independently on your shoulders, and it's kind of like a camera on a tripod, which means if I did have real people in front of me here, I could look over here and look over here and look here. But what I'm not doing is kind of swinging this direction or swinging this direction. My head moves independently on my shoulders. And think about how eagles and owls survey their surroundings. Shoo, shoo. We refer to them as regal or wise. And then one more point, your eyes and nose need to align and track in the same direction. And so once again, if I had people in front of me, if I turn to look at this person, both my nose and my eyes point directly toward them. If I look at this person, nose and eyes directly toward them. Notice what happens with you if my eyes and nose move a little bit more independently. I'm very likely to look uncomfortable, but I could also look sneaky or mischievous or judgmental or skeptical. Have you heard the phrase looking out the corner of your eye at someone or side eye? What does that mean? It's kind of questioning or reticent. So you want to be literally straight on with the individual as much as possible. And even in listening mode, this is very important. In listening mode, we do have a tendency to be, well, it's kind of like the difference between being the pitcher and being the catcher. When you're in listening mode, you might round out a bit and even tilt your head so that you're just absorbing the message more. And when you're the speaker, you might lift up and just be more in that presenter mode. But in listening mode, I can have my head tilted, but my nose should still be pointed directly toward you because the difference between listening to you this way and listening this way is very different. So here's the takeaway. In this section, if you want someone to describe you as having a strong spine and a level head, by all means, have a strong spine and a level head. And if you want someone to describe you as being straightforward and direct, by all means, be straight on as much as possible. But if you got the impression in that I'm asking you to be kind of stock still, that would definitely be problematic because owning space and moving fluidly in space is also a key signal of leadership presence. So whereas your core is providing that solidity, that groundedness, your hands and facial gestures create the fluidity and the interactivity, and both are vital. Hand gestures are hardwired into us. They're a form of communication that's deeper and older than verbal communication. Even blind people gesture when they speak. So it's not even necessarily something we've learned visually. But here's what's most interesting about hand gestures. They are an unconscious communication process, which means when you are not thinking about it, your hands are probably very much engaged in the conversation. And as soon as you begin to think about it, as soon as you become self-conscious, you just may have no idea what to do with the appendages at the ends of your arms. And it's in these moments that we have a tendency to go into some sort of lockdown or masking mode. And that is a key tell that you are, in fact, nervous or intimidated. So you don't have to learn how to hand gesture because you gesture hundreds upon hundreds of times throughout the day. But what you do need to learn is not to mask in your face or hands when you are in fact nervous or intimidated. It is a key tell of nervousness. So the takeaway is if you want to give the impression you're perfectly comfortable, the second your mouth begins moving, your body language should talk too. Because what intimidated looks like is your mouth is moving, but no other body language signal is online yet, which is what I'm doing right this very second. Yes, I'm talking to you, but I'm not interacting with you. So your face has to be alive. Your hands have to be alive. Now, one of the masks that we often see up here runs a spectrum. On the one end, you might get the smiley mask. And it's not even that it's a lie. I might, in fact, be a very friendly person. But sometimes we become so habitual about smiling under pressure that even when we're not under pressure, we just can't get the smile off the face. The opposite of this, poker face. It would take a little bit longer for you to see this, but pretty soon you'd recognize there's just no action happening here. As listeners, we don't just listen to the words of the speaker. We read the face of the speaker, and a poker face is protective. It leaves it up to you to fill in the context because I'm not committing to any of it. The bottom line here is I'm not asking you to manufacture hand gestures or facial gestures, but I am asking you to be very cautious of when you're wearing a mask so that because it's a key tell of nervousness. A couple of other tells of nervousness that are worth talking about right now. One is a verbal tell, and that's that when we are feeling under pressure, feeling self-conscious, we are so much more likely to self-comment or self-apologize for mistakes or perceived mistakes. And I'll give a quick example of what that sounds like. I'm going to make a mistake on purpose and then I'll apologize for it. Let's just say that I'm talking along and I mispronounce something and make a big show out of it, like I just did. So I tripped over that word. I laughed at myself. I did a kind of a cute dance, and then I moved forward. That was a pretty strong self-comment. But here's a very, 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 very subtle self-comment that is extremely common in interview situations. Let's just say that I'm talking along and I mispronounce something and then have to take a quick moment to scold myself or to flinch at that. We make those kinds of mistakes where we mispronounce something and correct it or use incorrect grammar and fix it. We do this so often in everyday communication. The metric on this, by the way, is that we will trip over a word, correct it, and move forward once per paragraph in everyday conversation. But when we're self-conscious, we notice every mistake we make. It surprises us. They snowball. And so the bottom line here is you do have to correct a mistake if you make one, but that should happen pretty naturally. Don't draw attention to it in any way. Here's what a natural correction sounds like, a natural subroutine of correcting. Let's just say that I'm talking along and I mispronounce something and then keep going. See, I tripped over that. I corrected quickly, seamlessly, and moved forward. That's what natural corrections sound like. I've already done several of them in this particular seminar, but you probably haven't noticed. So the bottom line here is you are naturally going to make some mistakes, trips of the tongue, mispronunciations that you correct. That's human behavior. Correct and move forward. Don't draw attention to it in any way. And this also includes any kind of self-commenting like, I just haven't had my coffee yet this morning. Anything along that line. Do not let your listener see or hear any internal conversation you have about how you're doing. Keep that to yourself. All right, so that is this element. I was just talking about your hand gestures. So the bottom line here is strong spine, level head, and own that space in front of you. Make sure your nonverbal communication is turned on, even in a virtual interview. The next skill set on my list, voice. It's not accidental that we describe someone who has great influence as having a powerful voice. It takes power, physical power, to have a powerful voice. You burn more calories when you speak with a stronger voice because it takes more energy. But you can develop strength and stamina so that it doesn't feel like it takes more energy. Same thing with posture. It does take more energy to have strong posture, but you can develop the habit of it, so therefore it doesn't feel like it takes up more strength and stamina. So regarding this particular skill set, I use a metric from 1 to 5 when I'm evaluating someone with their vocal skills, where I can identify where someone is from just being okay to truly being exceptional. And I'll do that. I'll do a relatively quick version of that right now for you. 1 on the scale would mean you couldn't hear me, so I'm actually not going to demonstrate that one, but 1 means you can't hear a word I'm saying. 2 is a bit like this. It's very soft, and you may be able to hear me, but you're doing all of the work. Level 3 is average. It's fine, and most people speak at average volume. It's fine. It's adequate, but it's just adequate. I'm missing a lot of opportunities to prove that I have confidence in myself. Level 4 is hopefully where I've been speaking all along. With this volume, I'm doing everything I can to meet you in your seat, to take my voice all the way to you. And level 4, it's a sliding scale. Of course, it depends on the size of the room and the acoustics, but it means perfect for that situation without crossing the line. And level 5 is that 1 step too far where if at level 4, I was really making a connection. At level 5, you begin to put up some boundaries. So it's a really big drop from 4, perfect connection, to that 1 step too far, getting you the opposite of what you want. People put up barriers. And most people intuitively know this. So most people Gravitate to that safety of the average zone. That is the most common mistake I see with any group that I work with, people who are willing to be average. This is a case where good is the enemy of great. If you are average with any one of your skills, you won't get any feedback because you're fine. But you miss the opportunity to be exceptional. And I don't believe that true leadership presence, gravitas, is a matter of making up for the mistakes in your style. I believe true leadership presence is understanding the difference between average and optimal and getting as many skills up there in that optimal zone as possible. The payoff is huge. The stronger your volume, the more comfortable, the more authoritative, the more confident you are likely to come across. When it comes to articulation, and that's the clarity with which you pronounce your words, I'm not talking about an accent or a dialect, but truly the difference between speaking clearly and mumbling. The more clearly you articulate, the more intelligent and the more attentive to details you will come across. For pacing, words per minute, in general, the more slowly you speak, the more comfortable, the more confident, the more authoritative you come across. And this makes sense. If I'm speaking slowly, I indicate that I have the authority to take up your time. And if you have the habit of speaking fast, just purely as a matter of habit, you are likely to come across as less comfortable because of it. So those three skills, volume, articulation, and pace, they are vital, laying the foundation for clear communication. If you ever have gotten feedback, or if you, let me put it differently, if you regularly get feedback that you speak too softly, that you speak too quickly, that you mumble, this is definitely something to pay attention to. It actually is amazing to me, for me and my team, when we're giving people feedback about their skills, we might say, "Are you aware that you speak softly?" We'll hear, "Yes, I hear that all the time." So I just want to acknowledge if you are getting that kind of unsolicited feedback, it does deserve some attention. Unsolicited feedback is very difficult to give. So if you're hearing it regularly, it means it really is a problem in your communication. So I would attend to that first. So now I've covered strong posture, strong gesture, and voice. Let me just turn to Olivia for a second and see if there are any questions before I move to the rest of the content.
There aren't any questions in the chat, but I do want to offer up the opportunity if anybody wants to come off mute and ask any questions.
And you don't have to. I still have plenty of material to cover, but I wanted to make sure there wasn't something pressing out there. All right, so
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, Kara, this isn't a question, but a comment. Bridget and I were chatting about this, just about how fantastic this was going. So much of this seems like acting too. Like it is
oh yeah,
a lot of acting, especially in the way that you pronounce or you announce your voice and try to fill
yeah.
the room. And so that was just something that I thought about.
Well, simply because we don't have enough time to do everything in this conversation, there's a step that I often do at the very beginning of any kind of session where I talk about the quality of authenticity. And I want to address that you absolutely can use strong speaking skills and still come across as extremely authentic. I personally am doing a lot of acting because I want you to see the difference between certain behaviors. But hopefully, my natural style doesn't seem like acting, but just when I turn these things on and off. But let me talk for just a moment about this quality of authenticity because I believe so strongly that it is important. I believe you will be at your best if you are first yourself. And then it's excellent if you have some strong speaking skills on your side. But my take on authenticity is just a little different than common thought. I don't believe you're authentic because you are in your natural state or your raw state, or that you're just not trying very hard. I think true authenticity is when the adjectives you would use to describe yourself are the very same adjectives someone else would use to describe you. There's a certain alignment there. People really get you and they understand you and you come across as you intend. That's real authenticity. And I will say in my business, the biggest gap in that is it's a bitter pill to swallow. But if we're being ineffective, if we are not representing ourselves well, it is almost certainly unintentional. Nobody does that on purpose. So it's usually some kind of blind spot. And adjusting a habit so that you would be more effective at first feels inauthentic. It absolutely does because it's not your habit. And so speaking up, speaking with a fuller voice can seem like it's false, but I would just call it good customer service and perhaps representing yourself well. So I do not think it's inauthentic to intentionally use your skills well, but it might feel that way at first if you're just not used to doing that.
There
Excellent question, Olivia. I
There are
appreciate it.
two actually questions about sort of the mechanics and technical logistics.
Okay.
Jennifer was asking for the loom lights. Do you need one on each side, or is one enough?
It really depends on the other light in your room because I have two just so I can have cross lighting. So I have an MFA in theater, and one of the things we know there is to get rid of shadows, you need light coming from two different directions. And so I have one on each side so that I can get rid of any kind of shadow. I also have a window besides the one in front of me. I have one over here. At the end of the day, so much light is coming in over here. I have to turn this light on to compensate for it. So it really does depend on your setup, whether you need one or two, but I highly recommend two. And I've got them on tripods so that I can raise or lower them. You can turn them up or turn them down. And I appreciate the Lume Cubes, bet Lume, Lume Cubes more so than the ring light.
The second logistical question was, do you have any view on using an earpiece versus using a conference room puck?
I think the clearer sound is the earpiece, right? I mean, that would be my take on it. There's less acoustical issues, bouncing off the wall, that kind of stuff. And I think we're used to that enough that it doesn't seem odd when someone is wearing an earpiece. If you can hear better and you will sound better, I think it's worth it. But if I've got this microphone in front of me here, and if you want to use a microphone in front of you rather than a headpiece, that is also okay. You just want to be heard and understood as clearly as possible. All
One
right.
last question for you, Kara. Somebody was asking if you could remind us what the three elements of strong voice are: volume, pace, and what is the third?
Articulation. How
Articulation.
clearly you articulate. I'll give a quick example here. If I'm using this especially clean articulation, you might get the impression that I'm attentive to details because my articulation is attentive to details. But if I'm using this level of articulation right this very second, I know you can understand the words that I'm saying, but I doubt that I sound as intelligent as I did just a second ago. So it's a very, very powerful skill. And honestly, I got a call about 10 years ago from an attorney who was on paper amazing. But when he tried to give me his credentials, his articulation was so poor, I honestly didn't believe him until I went online and found out, yeah, whoa, he's a powerhouse. But it did surprise me. At first, I had a huge block because his articulation was poor. And again, I'm not talking about an accent or a dialect, not at all. Actually, our brains are hardwired for novelty. So when we listen to someone who has an accent different than our own, more neurons are firing. So it can be an advantage to have an accent different than the person you're speaking to. So that's not the issue. It's the clarity. That's the most important part. Okay, I'm going to jump back into my core content for a moment, and that's to talk about eye contact. Now, there is a big difference between the use of this skill in person and virtually. In person, eye contact is very reciprocal. So if I'm looking at you, it looks like I'm looking at you. And not only can I give that signal that I'm paying attention to you, but I can read your signals at the same time. Very reciprocal. In virtual communication, if I'm looking at you, it would often look like this. And so we have to use the medium as best we can to get to bridge that gap. And it's a technology gap. So again, get whoever you're speaking to as close to the camera as possible. But there are two parts to eye contact that are most important. And one is, does it look like I'm looking at you? Great. But the second one is, can you process and hold eye contact or be literally focused at the same time. And I use a benchmark of 80-20, which means if 80% of the time your eyes are focused literally on the person or the people that you are speaking to, that's enough credit in the right direction. It does not have to be 100% of the time. You have permission to be human, to check your notes, to gather information from the ether. So all that is very human behavior. So that's the 80-20 benchmark. But almost everybody we work with needs to bump their skills up to that 80% rather than let yourself off the hook for the 20%. So when you receive a question, it is perfectly acceptable to have a moment where you would kind of gather your thoughts and look wherever you need to look while you're thinking, but then do everything you can to bring your focus back to the person you're speaking to. And if it does happen that you dart away to think about something, that's acceptable, no problem, as long as the highest percentage of time you are focused on the person you're speaking to. But this does bring me to one more rule about using this virtual medium. It is very easy in the virtual medium to have a script right next to the camera and read your answers. And I, at my best mentor voice, am going to say, please do not do that. There it's a very rare human being who can read information out loud or have something memorized and say it like it's just right off the top of their head. These people are usually called actors, to your point, Olivia. So, but unless you consider yourself one of an actor, we can tell if you're reading or if you've got something memorized. And what does it say about you? What's the nonverbal component about that? You don't trust yourself. You don't own that material. So it's just not going to work to your benefit to get the answer exactly right, but look like you've read it or memorized it. Much better to have bullet points to anticipate whatever questions come your way, have bullet points, and a bullet point can unlock a paragraph of an answer. And that's the best way to prepare. If you can look at a bullet point and answer for a paragraph, you are prepared. You don't have to memorize anything. But I just know that we get so caught up on wanting to get the words right that we forget the real thing that's going on here isn't the words. That's the last most important part. It's the image that's coming your way, that you have confidence in your own abilities and your ability to think on your feet. All right. So now I've covered strong posture, strong voice, strong eye contact, just a couple of derailers to watch out for, and that is excessive filler words, uhs, ums, ers. It is best just to leave a pause. And yet, typically about 9 out of 10 people in any kind of workshop situation have to work on eliminating fillers as a very high priority. And so the likelihood that you have a lot of fillers in your language, the probability is high. So that's where being prepared can really help. But also, I would try not to get caught up, let your head concentrate too much on eliminating fillers in the moment. Because what happens there is that you're focused on yourself rather than on them. You're caught up in your own head, and we want your personality to come forward. The time to practice eliminating fillers is way before you get there. And maybe even continually. And it does take a while to really cement this behavior. But this is the one behavior that I would suggest if you notice you're having fillers, just kind of note to self, but then try to put that away. Because becoming consumed with your own us, ums, ers in the moment, that's not the time to fix the problem. In the moment, you should be as focused on the person you're speaking to as possible, not with your own self. But I have some solutions for that as well. Which brings me, I'm going to talk about the balance between authority and approachability, but I have some resources that I will offer at the very end of this session that can be helpful with all of the material that we've just been talking about. Some free resources for balancing authority and approachability, managing nervousness, a self-evaluation checklist so that you can put yourself on video and then take a look at how you might assess your own behaviors when you're on camera. And so I have that information available to you, and part of that can be about eliminating fillers. The last bit of information I'd like to pass forward is about the balance between authority and approachability. And I honestly believe the best communicators of all do both at the same time. However, sometimes it happens we'll lean a little too far in one direction or the other, and we get some negative pushback about that. Or we want to bolster up one side or the other, and you might wonder what skill to work on in order to get that better balance. So the information I'm about to give you right now is available in a handout, which is on that slide I'll show at the end. So don't feel like you have to take mad notes, but this is in general the bottom line. If you want to bolster up your authoritative side, try to take up space, maintain direct eye contact, keep your head and shoulders level, try to be relatively still, use strong volume and resonance in your voice, and downward inflections. So, all of those behaviors are very positive communication skills, and they lean to an assessment of authority. On the approachable side, what behaviors would you prioritize if you want to bolster up that side? Well, once again, maintain direct eye contact. This is a double bonus. It lives on both sides. But other behaviors that tend to lean to an assessment of more approachability, fluid interactive gestures, fluid interactive facial gestures, lots of vocal variety, and the ability to elicit a response. And elicit a response means that you include someone in your conversation. And if you are having a back and forth, include means you can ask questions or you can get participation. But if it's more of a situation like I'm in right now, where I'm the primary speaker, I include you by sending a lot of nonverbal signals that we're in this together. So reaching in your direction, nodding every now and then, raising my eyebrows, interactive gesturing. So this sort of thing makes it feel like we're communicating together. And this list that I just mentioned about approachable behaviors, these are all excellent communication skills that lean to an assessment of approachability, but no pushback. They're just good skills to have on your side. So these two lists that I just mentioned, I'm trying to do all of those things at the same time. I'm hoping you'd find it difficult to decide if I am more authoritative or more approachable on this topic. But depending on the situation, I absolutely can lean more in one direction or the other. And in an interview situation, you may be very likely moving back and forth between showing more authority and showing more approachability, depending on the question that comes your way. And once again, I do not think that that is inauthentic. What I think is that it's the best toolbox of all is to have as many skills in that toolbox as possible and use the right one for the conversation. It's okay to choose the right tool for the moment. There is one particular, oh, you have a question for me, Bridget?
Cara, just a question, and you've mentioned twice about working with attorneys. Is there
Yeah.
something special about working with attorneys that we should be aware of, since most of the people on this call are in fact attorneys? It sounds like you have quite a bit of experience in that.
I do. I personally, so in my company, so I own the company and I have five other trainers. But in my company, my personal line of business is about 50% with attorneys and firms. And so I just have a lot of experience. And what, because of that, mostly by using that term, I was trying to point out that attorneys are not different than other people. You're still going to perhaps have to manage nervousness and deal with some masking. There's this a concept out there in the world. I'm not with the actual attorneys that I interact with, but there's a concept out in the world that somehow attorneys have it all locked up. Like they've learned everything they need to learn in law school, and especially about their presence, and that every attorney is a trial lawyer and they have excellent. So there's that sense every one of us is just human, including all of the attorneys that I interact with. And so we have our own internal conversations and self-consciousness and nervousness that comes up. And so in bringing that up, I was only trying to point out that this happens for us too. Great. So there is one concept in this area of balancing authority and approachability that I really want to address, and that is the difference between authority and aggression. Because some people lock them together like somehow they are the same thing. But I want to point out they are very different and the signals themselves are different. So I was working with a woman and I told her that she would benefit by showing more authority in her style. And this is how she responded. She said, I don't think that's true. People tell me all the time that I come across as too authoritative. So I don't think that is the direction I need to go. And I thought, okay, I get why she got that feedback, but that's not what was happening. She was too aggressive. this leaning in, looking out the corner of her eye, emphatic gesturing, fake smile, all aggressive signals. Opening your body language up to everyone, making direct eye contact, fluid interactive gestures, that's authority. So it's important not to confuse authority and aggression because they tend to get the exact opposite response. We tend to be more relaxed and enjoy being in the company of someone who carries authentic authority, but we resist someone who is aggressive. So if you've been trying to build your authority and you've been getting a lot of resistance, the likelihood that you're using negative behaviors to get there is extremely high. And that's why I would just highly encourage you to go onto my website. That was a good time for me to show you that that slide. I encourage you to go. I created this page just for you. And there are 4 resources here that I think are valuable to this conversation. One of them is a handout on balancing authority and approachability that says similar things that I've just said, but I also go into more detail about some of those negative behaviors to watch out for. But I also have a self-evaluation checklist so that you can watch that video that you took earlier and look through that self-evaluation checklist and see how well you did with these particular skills. And there is some information on managing nervousness, a 20-minute video on how to bring your chemicals under control and how to proactively prepare for those times you know you're going to have a little bit of adrenaline in your system. So I hope you've had a chance to look at that particular slide. I'm now going to bring my focus back to you so we can wrap this up. All right, I've truly enjoyed chatting with you. If you have questions, if you have a burning question now, Olivia, by all means, you can run it my way. Oh, she has one. Good.
Yeah, there's actually two. One of them is my own, and then one of them, I hope I'm pronouncing this, I use posed. And that is about voice and especially being a woman or having a higher pitch in your voice. I used to
Mhm.
ask, would you say that there's a difference between women or female identifying individuals and men and male identifying individuals in authentic authority? In male dominated meetings, contexts, it can be often societal norms that women are expected to be less authoritative or be more agreeable, approachable, friendly, instead of partaking in the technical or the business conversation. Do you see that in your work?
I agree with everything that in that comment. Absolutely. And but let me be specific about this balance between authority and approachability. We definitely are under different societal expectations, stereotypical expectations. This balance between authority and approachability works equally well for people in authority, whether they are male identifying or female identifying. And yet, societal expectations are that men in positions of authority can lean heavily to the authoritative side with very little approachability and still be well respected and liked. But women in positions of authority must have this balance between authority and approachability. You must have this approachable side in order to be respected and liked. And unfortunately, according to research, people will actually give up a job working that with a female authority figure that they don't like, but they're willing to work for men they don't like. So in other words, this balance between authority and approachability is vital for women in positions of leadership. So there's a stereotypical, unfortunate unconscious bias there. Oh, and the use of the voice. Let me address that for a moment. Both men and women, or anybody identifying in any direction, that can have a powerful voice. What changes is the pitch range. And it's kind of like the difference between a violin and a viola. Both can be powerful instruments, but they're definitely going to have a pitch range difference. And so we will respect the fact that if you think about highly trained singers, who has the more powerful voice, the men or the women? You cannot answer that question.
Mm.
Both have equally powerful voices. It's just the pitch range is definitely different. And so I encourage you to have the richest, most resonant voice you can within your pitch range.
I love that. Um, Someone asked in the chat, other than giving a pause before saying a filler word, How do you get prepared to avoid this when you are having a conversation or a presentation?
Okay, well, the reason we have fillers is that they act as little placeholders to buy us time while we're thinking and trying to decide what word to say next or which direction to take the conversation. So if you've scripted the conversation or you've been down that path a lot of times, you're not making any decisions. And so therefore, you're not likely to have a lot of fillers. But I've seen disastrous presentations where the core material is practiced perfectly and delivered seamlessly, but then the speaker gets to the Q&A and they get a question they are fully capable of answering, and they go into their natural habit of processing with fillers, and all of a sudden it looks like they're stumbling. So you need to get that natural processing style of using fillers as placeholders out of your communication. The time to practice that is not in an important high stakes conversation. Honestly, once again, get in your head. The reason we go blank in important situations is because we are asking ourselves to do something different than we usually do or better than we usually do. So you enter that high stakes conversation and you think, this is so important. I'll be sure to eliminate my fillers and make great eye contact and have good energy and get my hands level and point my nose directly toward the person I'm speaking to. And every time you give yourself that extra instruction, it takes up brain space. And that is why your words are not there for you. So the time to practice eliminating fillers is not in the moment. I mean, you can have a little note to self and try to put it aside. The time to practice is in everyday conversations or low risk conversations so that you can get this habit out of your style. And I do have more resources on how to practice that, but you probably can find that on my website.
Okay. Cara, this has been so fantastic. Thank you so much. But I feel that we've just touched the tip of the iceberg. And
Mhm.
so I've put my contact information in the chat. I'd like to invite anybody to reach out to me and say, Bridget, I would really love it if Cara could go back into a little more detail about XYZ, because we'd love to have Cara back to get in a little deeper on some of these things. Also, my second point I'd like to make is, Cara, it's my understanding you work both with individuals as well as with teams. Is that correct?
Yes, as a matter of fact, we do I personally, my job at the company is almost always a large group seminar or a keynote. And yet we also do a lot of workshops. So that's where you get very direct feedback and about your personal style and one-on-one coaching. So
Okay.
at Speechless, we offer all of those levels of communication from large audiences to very, very direct one-on-one coaching and feedback, which we do both virtually and in person. So if you're in some remote location, virtual communication coaching is very effective.
Okay, great. We're going to be sending out the recording of this event with that slide at the end. So if you want to get in touch with Cara, we're going to make it very easy for you to do so. Just also as a final, I just want to let everybody know our talent connector in January is going to be working with a professional career coach. And in February, we're going to be talking about working with a recruiter. So please watch for those announcements. And Cara, thank you again. You've been so generous with your time. I know we've run over, but thank you so much. And we would love to have you come back again.
It was a pleasure. All right. Take care, everyone.